Okay. Good night. Welcome to Fatherhood Talks. Tonight's show, the last day of January in 2023. The year is just already speeding along. We're here with our August body of fathers. Come up with fancy words like that. It's from Shakespeare's day. But I want to welcome everybody here to Fatherhood Talk, our conversation tonight. And hopefully it will be a good one. We have the panel of fathers that we're going to talk about a topic tonight. And somehow our topics seem to, not that we intentionally do this, but a topic seem to sometimes fall on events that are occurring in present day in our communities. And then we're just, at some point, we're not talking exclusively about that, but kind of more of looking at it in the father theme, the father framework that we could see it as. Tonight, the topic is, are you the problem? Are you the solution? So the question is, are you the problem? Are you the solution? And this is a really good. Am I a part of the problem or am I part of the solution? That's the real topic. Am I part of the problem or am I part of the solution? And so we're going to kind of talk a little bit about that. And that's so general, but there's so many things we can. And so that means that conversation tonight is going to be extraordinary. Again, I'm Ron Osborne Williams. I'm a father, and I want to introduce you to the rest of the fathers, and as we get ready. But as right before you do that, if you're clicking this on, you're coming on, like it, share it, subscribe to it, so you get the ding and know when we have these meetings. And if you're interested in a little bit more conversation, a little bit more in depth, look for the link for tomorrow night in the down below, and it will put you in tomorrow's night conversation. All right, with that being said, let me let the rest of the fathers introduce themselves, and then we're going to get started with this conversation tonight.
J. Robert Menard, father of 2 young adults.
Hey, good afternoon. Good evening, gentlemen. My name is Lionel Lightborn. I'm a father to a tribe of 7 young adults, 4 young men, 3 young women, and a grand diva of a daughter. So it's always a pleasure to be
here. Elder Thomas Alberry, father of 2 adults, and I'm also a grandfather of 7, 5 boys and 2 girls.
Is that it? That's all we got. Travis, you there, my brother?
Yeah, I'm sorry, but ants biting me. Give me a second.
Fred?
Frederick there.
Let's say ants biting.
I got him off, I think. Travis, father of 6, 3 stepkids, and 3 kids of my own. Well, I ain't gonna even call 4 kids of my own, 2 stepkids. I'm saying it like that because I want it to be known that, because that's how much love I got for my kids. They my kids. Enough said.
And Fred, oh yeah, you there. Go ahead, Fred.
Okay. Mr. Adams, father of 3, 1 grandchild, which you hear in the background.
All right. With that, we got a small group tonight, but hey, we all got big heads, so I mean a lot will come out. So so let's get I'm just gonna jump in here because I think probably at this point the world is talking about Memphis, Tennessee, the Memphis Police Department. They're talking about the brother who had passed away, Brother Nichols, who is a father. Well, who is a father? I'm not gonna say was a father. Who is a father because he was a father to his child, and as well as some of the officers were fathers as well. So, when we start thinking about this topic, are you part of the problem? Are you part of the solution? It almost states to me why it's so important to have these conversations as fathers, because sometimes we can forget what we need to be doing for our next generations. We kind of sometimes get all hyped up on the world and our positions instead of what our places are. And I know I say that in a way that might say, well, what do you mean position versus places? When we get put in positions, someone can take us out those positions. But when we know our place, that's where we stand, and we don't deviate from that. And as I think about all the rumors that's going on right now around this tragedy, because to me it's a tragedy all the way around, and not just the tragedy of the brother losing his life, but also now again here's another scenario where a brother loses life and other brothers are probably losing their life as well. A vicious cycle that we know somewhat exists in our community. And I'm very adamant of why it exists. It's not because that's what we want to do, is that we have been so conditioned and we don't have the intervention sometimes of those models that we need to show us other ways. And and people say, oh, that's an excuse and coming up. But research shows us. Research shows if science shows us, biology shows us, if you take a baby, any animal, and they don't have the parents to guide them, they die. They can't make it. And I know that sounds radical and what have you, but the evidence kind of showing us that. And so it should inspire us as dads and as fathers to say, I'm not going to stand for this. I'm not going to see my son dead in the street. I'm not going to see my son beating another person dead in the street. I'm going to stand up and show him that this is what I want him to do. This is how he needs to follow. And this is the legacy I want him to leave, that I want to leave for him to leave for his kids. And so a part of this issue is sometimes some of this is learned, and some of the things that happen is because we are part of the problem as fathers. And we need to start working on how we can become the solution to, and I'm a steadfast believer that we can be the solution to any problem that our families have if we stand up and do it. But a lot of times we're blowing in the wind. Are we modeling the wrong things? Gentlemen, I know I said a lot there, but that was heavy on my heart to just realize. And I know that right now people, almost like a divide, you got to pick sides, but to me, it's a bad situation all the way around. Just another example of some of the oppression that has been placed on us in this country that causes us to act out in ways that's not of our true nature. That's what I'll say, that more than anything.
I agree with what you're saying, Ron. And I feel when you said that it's a loss all around, I don't know if everyone understands the extent of the loss, of how many people are affected. It's not the people protesting only, you know what I'm saying? It's the families, and like you said, the generations coming up behind that are going to be fatherless because, or visiting the fathers, you know, in the jail cell. And the fact that you're now creating you're repeating another vicious cycle. It's powerful because it's, and I'm sure it's, and the thing is that I think this is a great example of unintentional role modeling.
Mm.
You know what I mean? What I mean by that is because of what you did, you unintentionally are role modeling a behavior that can be followed because of lack of your presence, because of the lack of your presence. And so I think when you look at that and when you think about that, you then have to look at the responsibility of your actions and taking the time to think about your actions. And we discussed this on previous fatherhood talks about being in control of yourself, being able to differentiate yourself from the group and being the one that stands out. And I think here, what amazes me is you have everyone there in the same mind frame. Out of all the guys there, they all participated. None of them took this time back or was able to fall back from what I would consider the peer pressure of the group and not participate or say, you know what, even if you started participating, you say it's going too far. And so I think that also is something that needs to be looked at when we talk about actions and behavior, is where is your sense of limitation? And do you have limitations? And have you been taught to set limitations on your behaviors? And at what point are you going to be responsible for your behavior versus saying the other person made me do it? Mm. And I think this is what we were referring to with our last fatherhood talks, where it was blaming others for your action. And at what point do you stop blaming someone else for your actions because you're in the midst of it? And when are you going to, and I guess it's more of a self-awareness that you have to have in order to take control of what it is that you want to put out there. I hope I'm explaining myself properly. Yeah.
I mean, if they don't understand, listen, they just got to listen a little bit harder, because what you're saying coming through crystal clear, probably because we on the same mindset about what you're saying, but maybe Lionel can give it to us in another way. Then they hear from 3 different people about the same thing, and maybe that'll happen.
I'm trying to understand. You said it's Memphis. Is this the one that I was hearing about with the 5 male African cops and the one African dude?
That's correct. That's correct.
I don't know what. So y'all have to. Y'all have, somebody got to explain to me what happened there, because all I saw was, from what I saw, was basically was on YouTube. It pinged up. That's how I basically saw it, and it was just mostly the action of what happened. Like they how they got them down and stuff. I don't know what's really going on.
Okay, Ron. I mean, Trav. Just in a nutshell, it's it was the 5. It wasn't initially. It didn't start with 5. It might have started with 1 or 2. I think the young man who was killed, or the young man who was murdered, African-American young man who was murdered, his girlfriend called the cops because he wouldn't give her car keys back. The cop got there, and I think it started with a simple, mild, I wouldn't even say domestic violence, because it was not really no violence going on. That wasn't the reason they was called. They were simply called because the boyfriend won't give the girlfriend back the keys. And how it escalated to the point that it did, of him being murdered and them finding themselves in a barbaric state that's usually initiated by hateful white men on black men, right? Because you see that type of behavior that's more so for people who can't relate to who you are and who never really saw you as an equal as it pertains to being a human being. But when I thought about it more, I saw and you got to understand the history of law enforcement in this country, not around the world, but particularly in this country. Law enforcement was birthed out of slave chasers. And so systemically, if the law enforcement career or the police career was actually birthed out of slave chasing, then how can something that's supposed to be created to serve and protect you, you understand, but it was created to actually chase you. So how could it actually serve and protect someone that was actually created to hunt, right? And so with that, no matter who you put in that system, even if you put a black man in a white system, you're still going to get a white result. It's almost like algebra or something. They say, what is it? A negative and a negative is a positive, something like that. Okay, it's almost the same concept. And so if you take a black person, again, and this is what happened in this particular case, because from my understanding, they even relaxed the laws to actually get those black men hired, because the laws was always so biased, or better yet, not the laws, but the standards of hiring police officers was always so racially biased that they had to relax those racially biased laws just to get those particular young black men hired. And what those young black men did, and this is where it comes back to the topic of, am I part of the problem or part of the solution, is saying, oh, yep, look, we told you we shouldn't relax the laws to hide them Negroes, because look what they did.
Absolutely.
Look the position that they put us in. You understand?
That's
and
a good point.
When we're talking about being a part of the problem and part of the solution, they had a lot of adjustments that happened to actually get them hired on the force. But what they did is what the current narrative, since technology has been erected, we've reframed, and I'm not talking about words wise, we've reframed the narrative of Black life just simply with our videos. And so if I ask you right now, and anybody can do this research for themselves, if I ask you right now to Google fights, and particularly fights online and stuff like that, and just to prove my point, World Star was built on Black people beating up, you know what I'm saying, like just Black violence, and not Black on Black violence, Black violence being perpetrated particularly and predominantly on Black people. And so if you're inundated with violence always being a normal thing for Black people, or violence being Black people being the victim of violence, and you're inundated with that narrative and that videos and inundated with that on a daily basis, then it starts to do something to you psychologically that you feel like it's okay, and that Black life is not even worth nothing to you as a Black person. And so this is not only, so the police officers acting no different than the average gangbanger in Chicago.
Right.
You understand? It's the same perception, because they're affected psychologically the same exact way, given their age too, as well. And so when they was given the upper hand, like if you put some guys in the car and they're gangbangers, and you give them the right tools and the right car and put them in the right situation, they're gonna go through with their drive-by. Okay, it's the same exact thing. They felt like, oh, we have the authority. You understand? We've been endowed with the authority to not have to take this verbal abuse, when in this country we've taken verbal abuse all our life. But in this particular time, they've used the authority to actually assault this guy, and that's essentially what happened. And so when it comes to being a part of the problem and part of the solution, and I kind of ran into that on that, is when these guys pretty much can make it very hard, or just, I told you so. And for the most racist white person, they can get to say, oh, I told you so. They're not fit to be policemen. They're not fit to be an authority. You understand? Different things like that. And so what they did, they didn't just give that community a black eye. They gave the whole African American communities around the country a black eye by saying that we're not fit to actually serve our own community as it pertains to law enforcement and protecting it.
Mm.
Just to add a little bit to that, I did a little bit of research. I found out that that Nicholas' girlfriend was the ex of one of the policemen. which added fuel to the fire when they caught up with him.
And that can be a factor too, Elder. What you're saying can be a factor too, because a lot of times, and you see this in just about anybody who may have been an introvert or misfit in school. A lot of people use their authority to exact revenge in their professional life. And so if I wasn't this, now I have this particular profession, this particular pedigree, and they tend to regress maturely. It's like a mature regression. And so they tend to be what they couldn't be in their adolescence or teen or young life in their adult life. So they tend to exhibit very immature behaviors in very mature professions. And so what you just said, Elder, that can be a part of the problem as well, because if that and I can believe that even in the mafia, they don't allow their people to sleep with each other wives, because they know the contention will be it won't be able to fix the contention if they was to get at odds with each other. And so that's why they didn't allow that in the mafia. But it works the same thing in everyday life. The contention can be so deep and so intimate when you factor in that if she was the ex-girlfriend or the mother of one of those cops' children, or just the relationship in general, then that could have played a part in the level or the way that that particular violence escalated.
Mm.
Anybody else? Travis, was that clear enough for you, Trav? Or do you need some more insight?
I mean, I understand what you're saying, and to the situation that to the topic that we're saying now. I mean, honestly, I feel like if put myself in the police's shoes, I mean, I wouldn't want my son to see me in that situation.
Mm.
You know what I'm saying? And now that it came down to an actual murder and now I'm in trouble, now I feel like, yeah, I became more of the problem than the solution in my own household. I mean, this is how I'm trying to express myself in the words that I'm trying to have y'all understand, because what I saw was just a straight up, like you say, like just a gang bang jump. It was just, that's what it was.
Mm-hmm.
No, it was no law enforcement in that. Once I think they handcuffed them or something like that. Once they handcuffed them and then they start going in, that went from law enforcement to just being just straight gang banging. Just they, you know what I'm saying? So for him and his situation and being a father on the opposite side of that, yeah, being in that situation, being on camera like that, I would have felt embarrassed myself if my son saw me on camera, me up here arguing with his mom about, I don't even forgot what even going on. I think it was about car keys or something like that you were saying. And now I'm on camera. Not only I'm on camera, I'm getting my behind stomped. Now, whether I'm in the wrong or in the right, well, no, he passed away. I apologize. I just thought about it. He passed away.
Well, let me. Oh, go ahead.
I mean, but still, how the situation came about, it was. I mean, yeah, I felt embarrassed up to a point. You know what I'm saying? Because that's the last thing my child gonna see is their dad arguing with their mom and then getting beat up by a police officer. Because yeah, I kind of feel like that would be some terrifying stuff.
Yeah, well, I don't, I'm gonna say I don't think it matters what happened prior. I don't think none of that matters. I think what is very important, and the responsibility, the accountability, all falls on those officers. And I say that because those officers were a part of what we would consider the special team that was supposed to be a part of the solution. They were out there to, and people could be okay. They're not supposed, they shouldn't be. People would be a little bit okay with some of the tactics they might have been using to keep the everyday citizens safe, right? Some of those same tactics that they did to this innocent brother are some of the same tactics they did to the Pookies and the Ray Rays, who with the Dracos, and they did these same kind of things with them. They not to maybe to the, but again, you're talking about, somebody said something very powerful to me today about this, is that when you don't know people, you don't know what they all can take. When you think that somebody can take a beating, but you don't know they might have other health issues that doesn't allow their body to be able to be able to, and I think about that a lot, because I know a lot of people who have passed recently. And the reason why they passed is because their body wasn't strong enough to sustain the impact or the trauma that it took. Whereas somebody else, I know a young lady who had a complete aneurysm, and she walking around here like nothing ever happened to her. Her body was strong. She could take having that aneurysm and being able to, get had the blood on the brain, and all this happened. But so it turns back into our topic tonight, that for us as fathers to look at this and say, and when we're doing the work that we're doing with our children and our families, are we being the solution? Are we being the problem? A lot of, I'm taking this so much away from that topic and bringing it back to what we really talk about, because that's a nice metaphor to look at in the situation. But I want us to really begin to look at the impact of when we think we're doing. And I'm gonna get. He's not on here. I was gonna ask him but to give an example of when we think, and I think he said that, he's not here, but we've all heard him talk a little bit about, the brother talk a little bit about not seeing his kids and being so animate to try to fight to see them and do all these things. And what we found and what we kind of see is that that's not a solution. It's not becoming a solution for them. It's becoming more of a problem. And so us being able to logically think about what is the solutions versus that we thinking we wanting to get what we want are being, and I would say sometimes in our emotions and not in our intellect, we end up finding ourselves being more of a problem than a solution as fathers, with our children's mothers, with our wives, with our children, with our coworkers, with all the whole area that we involve ourselves in. So this is a crucial testimony type topic tonight for us to begin to dig deep and say, am I being the solution and what's going on in my world and with my family? Or am I there you go, right there. Am I being the problem? Jay, that's Jay now? I think that's Jay. I was saying, I thought I seen Jay come on. He's there. He understands. Okay, good. So that's what I'm saying. Let's look at this a little bit more and let's break it down a little bit, because we got a great example behind us. But let's don't do what people do. Go to the zoo and look at the animals, but they don't look at themselves. Oh, look what the animal's doing. And the kids say, oh, Daddy, you do the same thing. Be quiet and just watch the animals. So and that's what I'm saying. Listen, we can all take some rocks and throw them, but let's learn from each of these experiences. And I'm only saying that because we can use exceptions that we experience in life to help us be better. Everything about us being better, about us being the best 24/7 dads that we can be, and we need to take every lesson from it to learn from.
Hey, Ron,
Yes, sir.
I want to add another thing. You know, the three paramedics that got fired. I said they came on scene and they were told that he was suffering from pepper spray, not a beat down. But I fought those paramedics. You hear what it said, but you evaluate the situation, the patient. Who knows that had they gone there and evaluated the patient may still be alive, possible. It's just sad all around.
But again,
another kid's gonna be fatherless.
And that's from not doing your job. Your job. Listen. Your job. You take the what is it? The Hippocratic oath, whatever the thing the medical people take. Patients are most important, regardless what the police tell you. You know, my dad's a firefighter. Me and my dad was talking about this, and the firefighter, he said that was a big contention a lot of times. The police say, "Oh, don't worry," and if that used to be a lot of the issues between firefighters and police officers in Philadelphia. That when they came on the scene, you can't tell me not to do it because I have a job to do. You did your job. You shot the man up. Now I got a job to try to save his life, get him to the hospital. Whatever has happened, and those guys didn't do it. Again, we're talking about, were you serious about your job? Were you serious about what's going on? Regardless of what the police tell me, I'm going to do my job. They can't beat me. Well, they might can, but again.
Well, Ron, you know what? Being a part of the problem and versus being a part of the solution, and even in this particular situation, you have to just individually, we have to be very mindful, right? Even when we engage this discussion, right? Because when I had to do it, I mean, I'm still reconditioning myself to do it. I have to understand every time I go into a discussion whether I'm advocating or arguing, right? And so I got to separate advocating from arguing. And for years, I couldn't tell the difference between the two. You understand? Because naturally, right in the middle is that activist I am, right? But see, being an activist, I'm like, yeah, being an activist still doesn't exempt me from being accountable to every word I say, because I don't know where I'm going to be tomorrow for those words to come back and haunt me. So I'm very tactful. The way, no matter what God take me at the end of the day, because at the end of the day, I don't believe, this is my greatest prayer, is to not bring any more embarrassment to the kingdom of God. That's number one. Number two, I have to pride myself, not even pride myself, but they be very intentional on when the word says, be angry, but sin not. You understand? And that's one of the best scriptures that can apply to this particular topic. What does that look like? Because
Absolutely.
I tell you, factually, emotions is everything but intelligence. I don't care how much savviness and stuff they put together. I hear people saying putting stuff together that they don't have no science for, right? Emotional intelligence. I'm like, yeah, it sounds good, but what does it look like? You understand? And these young men, and I'm talking about professionally trained young Black men that just beat another young Black man to death. You understand? What was the emotional intelligence that they're trained to actually execute?
Absolutely.
So which tells you that emotions, trust me when I tell you, emotions is everything but intelligence. So much so that they have to even put laws in place for different emotional situations. And so I don't want people to get hawked up and start getting high on these sayings that don't have no science behind. But what I will tell you is the fact that you do have a humane that's humane responsibility to interject and say, you know what, 5 of these guys beating them down, but if one of them would have interjected, just start to interject, let me break this up, then another one, that would have started a domino effect.
Right.
But when none do, and this happened even with kids and adolescents, if somebody interject and try to break it up, then you will see another person just waiting for the courage. And sometimes I think these days we don't have the courage to do the right thing. You understand? The courage. And so we got from a generation of stand up people to stand by people. And everybody's standing by on all fronts, watching it happen and figure the only duty I have to do is to record it. And not really recording it for the right reasons anyway. And so I think the narrative within our own internal culture has gotten, for the lack of a better word, prostitute. Because everybody's not doing it for the advocacy that's needed, or even the actions that needed at that time to correct the problem. We're doing it for the attention. That's called vanity in the Bible. And I've never really seen, I've lived, 51 years now? I've been 51 years. I have never seen this level of vanity in my life. And you will hear that vanity is one of the deadliest sin, but you never really see vanity until like right now, I'm like, Jesus Christ, so that's what vanity is. And so now we need all the knowledge that we can get to combine to make sense, not only to make sense of what's going on, but to combat and be the solution to what's going on right now, because this is a very dangerous situation, not just in the Black culture, but in the world, in the world itself.
You know, like what you said was very was I think spot on with the emotional intelligence, because I think when you start to talk about emotions, especially the mob mentality, it's so easy for one person to just start to fall, like you said, to fall in line. And once that second person goes along with it, peer pressure starts to build, and everyone else just wants to fall in line with the same thing. You can look at, when you're looking at that mob mentality and trying to combat mob mentality, I think that one person, like you said, that one person who wants to step up and say, you know what, this is not right, is going to be overwhelmed by the others who are continuously saying, come on, man, don't be weak. And so you don't want to be viewed as the one that was weak. I mean, you can even go back to think about the with even George Floyd with the knee on the neck. The cop tried to stop the other one, and he was like, yo, back up. And so what did he do? He just backed up, and he just stayed. It's and I think that's also gearing towards, like when Ron said something, being in your position and being in your place. I think none of those people were in their place, but they were all put in a position without understanding their place and purpose. And so when you start to put people in a position without understanding their place, then you start to get, for lack of a better word, when it happens, anarchy, because no one knows who to follow or who to step up and create a leadership type role. And so I think that's very important, that when we start to look at, and you can even look at all those aspects, and when something that Elder Thomas said, when the paramedics came in and they listened to what was happening and they didn't evaluate for themselves, you can almost take every instance of that and place it in fatherhood. The paramedics who evaluate situations so they can make an educated decision on how to handle what's going on. That's you as a father coming in when your kid messes up. Now, the irrational father who overtakes it, and that piece where they were beating the man to an abusive state, to the fact where after he died, well, that's you. Now, how are you going to handle that situation? Are you going to be part of the problem, part of the solution? And that over aggressiveness as a father, you're starting to become part of the problem, not the solution. Because now you're teaching everything that you got to handle, if you're not happy with it, comes with force. You see what I'm saying? And now you have the people who are standing by doing nothing. And that's an extent of how you handle things as a parent. Because you can also, how do you say, almost do nothing to the point of a neglectful state, which still sends that person to their death. And so when you look at the situation, it really parallels how you as a father manage your household and all the states you could possibly be in managing that household, and how, and looking at that and saying, you know what, I don't want to be part of that problem. I want to be part of that solution. And so you evaluate differently. And I don't want, for lack of a better word, you use punishment differently. You understand when it is that you need to be more assertive versus backing off, so you're not in that neglectful state. And so all this little really parallels to what you should be doing as a person. I think Lightborn hit it. We sometimes we tend to be the person behind the camera recording just to record and not recording it for purpose. And so once we start to take all these things into effect, we start to think of ourselves, and we start to think of how we handle situations. We then can teach our kids to handle situations a whole lot differently, and which will lead them to never be put in a place, when they're in the place of authority, to abuse it, because someone before them taught them how to handle situations in which you have to be assertive, not dominant. And that's a big difference.
I just want to tie in with you. Just one thing you said. Let me use my Rohan. Real quick. Rohan, I'm just messing with you, man. But to J. Rob's point, you're 100% right. Because if a child dies in the custody of the parents, you understand, even though one parent may have not actually caused the death and the other parent did, both parents still gets the charge. You understand? And I think this is what's happening in that particular situation with those cops. So it speaks a lot to fatherhood and parenting as a whole when it comes to the accountability and to the responsibility of those who have authority over you.
I just wanted to say one quick thing, real quick. I think a lot of times, especially in this particular case, where I think that the officers did not stay in their lane and know their role. And what I mean by that is there is a huge difference between I enforce the law and I am the law. In this particular case, I think that they escalated from, especially when he ran, supposedly, it's kind of like the parent, don't you run from me. If you run from me, it's going to be worse. They went from, I'm going to enforce the law in this particular case, until now, guess what? I am the law. And because I am the law, I can do to you as I please, because I no longer have to regard the law, because that is what I am. And that is a dangerous thing. And that's been done for years and years and years and years, that people have just taken the law into their hands and have become the law. And so they're going to be the judge and everything else, and take that into account. And there's no amount of training that you can receive that can change that once you've made that decision in your mind. That's what it is. That's like a parent that says, now, guess what? I'm not doing what God says. I'm God. Once you make that changeover, there's nothing you can do but really change the system. To me, I don't know. What do y'all think?
Ryan, you were gonna say something?
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, I thought somebody was going to answer Lauren's question because I think first I want to go back a minute when Robert was talking and he was saying that, and even Lionel alluded to it earlier, the idea of I was speaking to a friend of mine, and he was talking about the conversation he had with his son about some things that was going on at a school. And he asked his son, hey, what would you do? And in that conversation, and I mean, it's my tight buddy, man. And the conversations he has with his son about things, he said, son, what would you do if this happened to you in this situation? And the son told him the politically correct answer, right? And he said, Jay, he said, son, I don't want you to tell me the political, I want to tell me what would you do? Because what you think you should do in your gut is what you should what you should do in this situation. And you won't have to worry about it no more. But I told him that it was so good for how you're working with your son like this, and this idea of giving him the options. And when we talk about this thing about, oh, people have emotional intelligence. Well, when people get emotional, they don't have no intelligence. They are irrational. So when you can have them to be able to stop and think and be rational like men are, a lot should be. I got a reason why a lot of men are not rational. They're emotional. Why they're emotional and not rational. But that's another show for another day. But the reality for this, what we're talking about is giving the option to say, hey, I should stop this right now. Or I should not accept this. Or we should not be so pumped up. But the pumped upness is, and I pray to God. I pray, and I've said this, and I hope that what is being rumored to why this thing happened, and some of the things that was said that why this happened and how this really occurred, and how this guy was actually targeted, not for doing any crime, but targeted for an outside reason. I pray that this is not true. Because it has such an effect to say that thing that Larry just talked about is people forget that they're not enforcing the law, that they became the law. Even when you're not even dealing with law stuff. Because I'm the police, I can do whatever I want. King Kong ain't got nothing on me. That kind of mentality is what we kind of see in this situation. If this comes out to be true, and it will hurt the heart, and it not only does it hurt my heart, but it hurts me in the idea of what it means for our community. When you think about Black policing in America, these police officers, people fought and protest so you could have your own Black police officers in your own community. Only to have them now do the same thing that the white police. So what we even need it for if you want to do the same thing to me that somebody else was doing? We was hoping to get you in the community to be like, understand what's going on with us and help us and serve and protect us. Not serve and protect and break our necks. That's not what because we already had that from the other officers, because the other officers follow the traditional, as Lionel said earlier, the history of how policing even came. Listen, I asked somebody, I told somebody that was talking about police. I said, can you go look up and see when policing was started? Because policing wasn't started before slaves was free. They had no police back then. They had no police. So just do a little bit more history before you running and ready. Notice that there was no policing of free white people in the country. That's how a Black man could have been snatched off the street and put back in slavery before slavery ended. Because you couldn't go to a police detective and say, hey, my brother missing, we don't know where yet. Because there was no police. So being mindful, we have to be mindful, man. And this is probably one of the, people might say George Floyd was sad, but this incident is probably one of the saddest ones we're going to see as a community of Black people. As Black people, because we are so much involved in it.
I think as a community,
you say that, Ron. I'm sorry,
ahead.
Gaspar, go ahead.
I think as a community of color, I definitely agree with you on what you just said there, Ron. Man, y'all have said, I came in a little late, and I apologize to you brothers and to everyone listening on here. as a member of the justice system, because as an attorney, I played my part in that system from a defense perspective. When you sit down and you look at what happened, and I take out the lawyer of it, but I just look at myself as a Black male, I 100% agree with what Ron said in reference to this is even worse than the George Floyd situation, because we all thought we understood the common enemy. But now the enemy looks just like me. And the only difference is, and what I've now learned and have a better perspective on, and I've heard other people say this, is that it's not the color of the skin of the officer, the fact that he is an officer. And many of them have taken on the role of policing in general, regardless of the color of their skin, whether it be Black, brown, orange, whatever it may be, they have taken on what that role is, sadly. And I was talking to a young man today, and I asked him, like, what would that have, if that was you standing there? And I'm not talking about, I told him, oh, he's 23. So I said, you think that was bad? You need to watch the Rodney King beat down.
Right.
He said, Rodney King? I said, yeah. He said, wasn't that like in 1988? I said, no, I was in college, so that's about 92. So we went online and he said, hold up. Were they beating him with a baton? I was like, yeah. That we look at the only reason why Rodney King lived and this kid died is because of the weight. That kid, Tyree, he might have been 160 wet. Rodney King was a grown big dude, 250, maybe 260. That's why Rodney King lived and this kid died. And we were sitting there looking at it, and I'm like, hold up, they were beating Rodney King with a baton, like full-on swings with a baton all over this man's body. But he made it. And I share that as was saying to him, the difference in time is those dudes walked away with no punishment because the justice system said they didn't see, my bad, the group of people who was on the jury that looked like them said, we didn't see nothing wrong as far as any criminal. Today, after what happened with George Floyd, and it's different time that we in, these young men are looking at a significant time in jail. There is nothing that they can say about it that will change the way people are going to look at this vicious, not only beating, but then death. But in our community, when we used to look at the Black police officer and hope that he understands why I might have chosen the step I took, or the fact that I didn't know the dude's name is Jeremy because I call him Ron, and everybody in the neighborhood calls him Ron, that was my expectation of this officer, to look at me and possibly have the same mindset I did. But when you look at this now, you're looking at young Black people or young people of color in their community now questioning every officer, regardless of whether or not he looks like them or not, because that incident right there took away the one thing that I might have held on to and believing in this protect and serve thing, is that if they look like me, maybe they'll understand me and choose to give me the benefit of the doubt. But to now see what happened here with this young man, that went away. And now I'm back to the mindset of the very judgmental Johnny that looks at all men in blue uniform and say, you lie. Because when I go to court, every case that has a police officer with me, I always pull their internal affairs report first. I just assume they've had a history of beating people up. I just assume they have a history of doing stuff wrong. So I move with that mindset because sadly in our community, that's been what it is. And I just want to get that off my chest because, man, that whole thing, and when I look at how it has impacted us as a community, I think they don't understand what they did to our community was even worse than what happened with George Floyd.
Yeah.
You know, and I was gonna, you touched on what I was gonna say, Gaspar, because I was gonna say when I first heard, right, it flashed on the news, African-American male killed by police brutality, I was like, oh man. And then they showed the picture of the 5 Black officers. I said, what? That was more shocking to me. Who did it? than the actual crime itself. Because you just wouldn't expect, in your mind, you're like, there's no way, right? Because that's not something that you expect of your fellow, and I'm gonna say your fellow black cop, your black person who's a cop. You see what I'm saying? You like you said, you have the mind frame that, yeah, you know what, they're gonna understand what's going on. We want them around, we want them policing, and then this happens. Now you're like, I don't want any of y'all police. I don't want any of y'all around. Because and there's there's what they say, and I don't want to just blanket it, but you have what they say, like the blue wall, right? And so once you're on that team, you fall behind that blue wall. So now you regardless on how, like you said, how any officer moves, they have a lot more to prove now because of this than they would have had before. And I think that's the piece that, when you're in a position where you're representing, and a lot of people don't understand that you're in a position where you're representing, regardless on who you are, where your place is, what your job is, you're representing. And once you taint it, it's very hard for it to be overlooked, because you've now tainted the reputation of not yourself, but everybody else that goes along with it. And I think Lionel said it best when he said, "See what I told you? That's why we didn't let them in the first place."
All right, Castro, let's hear your knowledge.
Good evening, gentlemen. I thank you for allowing me to be here and just being in the room. My apology for being late. No, I'm not apologetic. I was in therapy. Now I'm here. Self-care. I have to say, I jumped in when Lionel, always a pleasure to hear you, bro. You were talking about emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence, it talks about self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship management, right? So when we talk about the lack of emotional intelligence, means you didn't have the capacity to self-regulate. You didn't have the capacity to manage yourself in that setting, right? Something that moved me a lot was when I heard the chief. I haven't watched the video. When I heard the chief talk about the not mob mentality, group think, right? She referred to it as group think a couple of times. I have to say, my pushback, or not pushback, just perspective of you wise men. Let's say for a minute, let's not look at race. Let's not look at skin tone. Let's look at the trauma, right? The underlying trauma that all of these men, white or black, have in similarity, right? And it really goes back to their inability to manage themselves, the self-control, right? And I think that's where the universal issue is at, is that we're not addressing the universal trauma as men that we are growing up with or that we're dealing with. And it just manifests in different ways. But universally, white, black, Latino, Asian, any other community, there's men that are trauma-filled that don't know how to fucking self-regulate and cause damage, right? And I think that's the universal issue. Is not, I don't want to say it's not a black and white, right? Because it is, right? I don't want to lose that. The underlining underneath that is the trauma, right? The trauma that as young men, these kids were not able to give the ability to self-regulate, express, fulfill, to where now they're in a position of power and now they think they're God, right? Like that's just what was placed on my heart. I throw that out there. You guys are the wisdom, but just where I'm from. That's my thought.
I think that you raise a very good point, and I think the part of for me, the part of the race that comes in is the fact that it's it's a Black group of officers that take a innocent Black man's life. That's the part that plays with the race for me. But I think you're correct with and we did touch on that a little earlier, which is the trauma that these people have suffered growing up. Was it the lack of a proper role model, father figure within their lives, that they're unable to process what it is or how to deal with everything? And I think the one thing that, and I don't, I've known people within the police force, and I've never heard them say, yes, we got hired, and yes, we're mandated to take therapy or learn therapeutic interventions in order to deal with situations of de-escalation. Now, I think it's more recent in times now that they do take de-escalation courses, but the therapy session still isn't there. Because when you put someone in I think when you put someone in a place of authority, they have to have the wherewithal to process. I think Clay always says it, that you can't be in two emotions at one time. Either you're in one emotion and then you're in the other. So you have to learn how to, like you said, Castle, manage those emotions so that you can be in one, not as long or longer than you should be. If I'm upset, I should be able to step back and process it real fast to de-escalate myself and de-escalate the situation. And I think that is what officers in general are missing, is that mandated therapy. Now, I know they get it, which I understand if they were involved in a shooting or something like that, they go through therapy then. But for self-care, self-management, I think there should be therapy that they go through, because you don't know what baggage you're bringing in to that job.
You finished, Rob? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm not to make sure I didn't want to interrupt.
Let me get it.
But you know what? To your point, J. Rob, they do have, and this is the strange part about it. Police officers have to undergo a psychological evaluation, right? This is, and I think we have to bring all this stuff into questioning, because it's about being, number one, reasonable, and when you're talking about anything, but particularly a subject like this. So they have to go through undergo a psychological evaluation, and then you have to be resourceful. I have to question that psychological evaluation, what seems to always eliminate Black officers and not white ones. And so what mindset you have to be in as a Black person to become a Black officer to pass a psychological evaluation that mostly white men only pass. You understand? So think about that, since we're talking about trauma. Think about that particular mindset.
That was written by a white man for white men.
Correct. So
like
that's some trauma for your ass. So now I have to almost deny myself, right? You're talking about, I like literally have to deny myself. I have to really, literally betray me first, right? And emphasis so I can become a part of something, right? That really supposed to be designed to rescue my community. But how can I rescue my community when I had to betray me first? And I went into a profession to become something else, or maybe even an enemy to myself, to protect and serve my own kind, right? And so when you look at that, we have to dig deep and say, okay, what does this psychological evaluation look at? What model did, since we're big on models and evidence-based stuff like that, we need to look at that stuff, because nobody really asked, what is that? What model do you use? Is it an ACEs? We know it's not an ACEs, but they just say it is. It's not an ACEs. And even if it's an ACEs, I think there should be two types of ACEs, because I'm like, listen, ACEs, which, and I forget the acronym, but adverse childhood experience. I'm like, yeah, but you also have adverse colored experiences as well. And so ACEs for white people may still not be the same for ACEs for Black people. And so with that, then you want to talk about the professional barriers that comes about when it comes between the choice of rank and righteousness. And I think Martin Luther King said it best: a man is not fit to live if he haven't found something to die for, right? And so with that, if it comes to rank, and most of these guys, you see this in the George Floyd, you see it in this thing too. What the hell these guys' righteousness back It's because of a certain rank. Simply put, they're scared to lose their job, and they're more likely to let a person lose their life before they lose their job. That is a travesty. Not no disrespect, Travis, but travesty is just but that is a travesty that a person is scared to lose their job in place of watching a person lose their life. And so what's the psychological makeup of that as well? And so it's so many things that we haven't looked at before that we need to start looking at now, especially being in this intellectual period that we're in. We got so many things. We got so many Black therapists, Ron being one of them. And we got things that we can question and say, okay, what have you guys been using? And we can change those very psychological evaluations to be inclusive of Black therapists and Black written theses that can actually be more effective in changing the policies of law enforcement.
Let me take the question. There's a question that was in the chat, and the question in the chat said, as far as fatherhood goes, my question is, where were the older officers on this jump out squad and on the job mentor that is showing them how to be a solution and not a problem? Thank you, Thomas. That's a really that hits directly to what we're talking about and how we're speaking about this to understand in the idea of what we're talking about fatherhood. When people come on your job, I know that any guy that I've come in contact with who's young, if you know him, young, who worked for me, McKenzie. Irvin McKenzie. I schooled him on everything that needed to be schooled, and we had a certain kind of relationship, and he got advice from me. I'm not like his dad age, but as an older big uncle, big brother type, he would always get the information, and I would say, don't do this, just like we do here. Listen, one of the big things is like what we do right here when we get the younger fathers in here, and we kind of guide them to what is a healthy mindset. And we're talking exclusively about fatherhood, but when we're talking about fatherhood, it's under the guise of manhood. You can't, the stuff we're doing and we're saying is because we're men who are fathers, who are telling other men who are fathers our experiences, and that they can come up and be not emotional, but be rational about decisions they're going to make later on involving their family, their children, and the surrounding world. And in this case, these brothers didn't make that type of calculation. They were almost, as many people say, they was a part of this pack. They were the pack. And I still in my mind am trying to figure out, where is it that I would have risked and given up everything I'm giving up for whatever this was? Whatever this turns out to be, whatever issue it was, why did they do that? Why, I think, and I don't mean to turn the corner on you, but I think about the Central Park Five, right? And when they brought them boys in the Central Park Five, they sold us a narrative that they was a pack who all decided to go do this. Them boys didn't even know each other, most of them. But the idea was saying the same mentality that they said that the kids had is the same mentality these officers had in this, that they said the kids had. The kids didn't have it. The kids didn't have it because the kids didn't do anything but just hang out like all other kids were running around in the park that night. But in reference to a lot of, and this is an old saying, the oldest gang in America is the police department. And they act like a gang. And they facilitate like a gang. So the answer to some of Thomas' question is, those OGs in the police department were probably the ones that said, we got y'all back, whatever y'all going to do. Until, they have a back. The only problem is the union didn't have their back. So I ain't ain't police union nowhere. So that might be where the problem comes. The police union not there. The OGs and what, but the police union is what gets you back. But if they don't get it, you're on your own, Doss.
Well, Ron,
I
think about
have
it like
to
this
say,
too. Oh, who that was? Oh,
go ahead.
okay.
I don't like going after you, but you always drive it better.
No, go ahead, Castro.
I have to say that I'm not have to. I jump in the fact that when Travis said that, I'm thinking somewhere in the process, it was understood that that was accepted, right? Just kind of what Ron was saying, like, I'm the Bruds. Omega Psi Phi is a non-hazing organization, but the Bruds will beat the shit out of you. That's just what it is, right? So it's understood. There's a level of understanding of what's popping off, right? So yeah, the unions didn't step up for them, but the old guard kind of said, all right, that's just what needed to be done. That's just what it is, right? And that's where I think the complete disconnect kicks in, right? Because there's no bridge building in the process. There's no bridge building on how do we move forward, right? How is the transitional period from that mindset to this mindset? You can't rock these kids out the frame while they're under your care, right? Like you just can't do that. You can't pledge pledges like you did in the 70s and the 60s, just going back to the fraternal reference, right? To what happens now, a membership process, right? And if you Zoom and have enough hours on your Zoom meeting, you're good to go. Okay, cool. That sounds great, but you're not going to be at the hangout and the barbecue at 2 a.m. eating chicken. That's a different lifestyle, right? So there's very thick demarcations of the life that you want to live within, right? So when you talk about that blue stripe, that blue line, that's the understanding, right? But to not say, but to bring it to perspective and kind of where I'm going is that as men, we said fatherhood, right? We have an understanding within each other of how we operate and conduct, right? And iron sharpens iron, right? I get tighter when I listen to Lionel talk. When Robert drops something, when Gene drops something, it's, oh, he's sparking something in my brain, right? Good, bad, or indifference. That's what that is, right? So now, how did these 5 individuals that didn't know each other but were in the same vicinity, or people that were in the same part of group but were still jumped in and didn't lose regard for themselves in the sense of how they're going to lose in their individual lives to this? I would say that the wild notion that we're all capable of doing that. We all intrinsically have that within our spirit because we're all interconnected, right? And if that person went to that race for that capacity and we somehow felt akin to that or can relate to that, now you're in the mix, right? And it's within your own boundaries and your own self-awareness, your own self-management to say, okay, I'm gonna go this far, right? Like I'm okay. Like I was the guy in college that used to go to the club with a mouthpiece, and I had a 4-ring belt buckle. And if it had, like, that's what it is. I have this tooth and this scar on my chest because I was that guy, right? So it was, you breathe that, you run that, that's just what it is, right? And it's however you decide to live life. But what I'm saying in my point and with this is we're all capable of being Mother Teresa's and we're all capable of murder. It literally comes down to your level of consciousness, self-awareness, self-management, and where you at in your life to say, this is my boundary and this is where I'm willing to stop, right? Mm-hmm. When I went when I found my accountant, he asked me, he said, do you want tax avoidance or tax evasion? I said, whichever one keeps me in my house. I can't father from jail. He said, okay, bet. This is how, right? And I understood what that meant because there was a higher value for me to be at home with my kids than to have $3 million in the bank and then be able to go to jail in 2 months. Like, nah, right? So I wrap it up with saying at any point in time, depending our level of frustration, stress, anxiety, whatever pressures are on us, we will react accordingly. And if already 2 or 3 of our peers are in that notion, it's a lot easier for us to jump in.
You 100%, and that's on point, Castro. You said that so eloquently. as usual. But at the same time, when we look at the makeup of the young men, all of them are young. They look like, I don't think none of them could be a good 35 years old. They're probably less than 35. And so when I looked at up the makeup at those, it was just a really dangerous recipe. And here's why. This is why I'm glad they asked that question. It's a dangerous recipe because there's something, and this has been proven across the country. Anytime you put, and let me put these air quotes, a special unit together. Let me say it again.
Right.
A special unit.
Exactly.
There's a psychology, and we know this with children. There's a psychology about putting the word special on humanity, period, be a child, adult, or whatever. People in general, our makeup, we just can't handle special because it takes away from the balance of who we are. It doesn't speak to the accountability or the responsibility of whatever the task is or the special task that you're trying to put forward. And so with that, if you have a special unit, right? A special unit, and back to the young man's point who asked that question, with no real guidance, right? And so here it is, we're young, you understand? We're irrational because we're young, we're immature, and with immaturity comes irrationality, and we're on a special unit, and then it's easy for that anger to get displaced, right? And so, and to Memphis' point, I understand why they put the special unit in place because of the level of violence that was going on with all the different rappers getting killed and the heightened gang violence. So I understand the need for it, right? And it was supposed to be like a gang unit, etc., to stop all the different drive-by shootings and all the rap wars and stuff like that was going on. So I do understand that aspect of it. But to not do your due diligence and put a process in place and a line of leadership that can feed the other line, you understand? And to make sure those ranks are in place when things get called, and to put all those immature, right, people in the same place, then that city actually got what it deserved because there was no protocol in place to say, hold on, no, nobody can make a move. Because it seemed like all of these guys who made the moves, they seemed like they were rookies. So you had rookies running rookies.
Right.
Even think it was no real leadership in place to actually call any shots. So when you put all the rookies in place and they start calling shots, the blind leading the blind. And so unfortunately, I think that city has done a great job when it comes to policing, when it came to the gang violence and the drive-bys and the kids getting shot. So I understand, I can't totally throw them under the bus because I understand the intentions of it. But the intelligence of it is what actually contradicts the intentions. And I think they should have been more intentional. That's the combination of intentions with intelligence, as opposed to just being just purely intentions with no real intentions behind how they was going to really address this problem of the violence going on, the particular gang violence going on in that particular city. And so, yeah, it was just a powder keg waiting to happen that just simply lacked the intention or intentionality that needs to really address that problem. And it was misplaced anger with immature rookies that just couldn't hold their emotions or demonstrate, to Castro's point, emotional intelligence.
I think, you know, this may be like a little bit of a thing, but I'm listening to what Lightborn said with the special, right? And then you think of where you get your how you say that, for lack of a better way to say it, your input on how you are going to behave. And I think when you say, look, I'm part of a special squad, right? And when you think about special squads, I'm sorry, especially with the police department, what do you think of? You think of shows like Chicago PD. You think of shows back in the day, The Shield. You think of the movie Training Day. And so I'm using this as an example of what you were saying, Lightborn, because if those are my references and they put me on this special squad, then my behavior is going to reflect what I reference because of the fact that that's what I'm pulling from.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I have no real guidance and I'm put out there with those references, I'm going to behave accordingly. Because that's what that in essence is what I know. You know, you have your just like if you think about, if they were placed on SWAT, it would be the same thing. If they had no real training for SWAT, then those would be just a bunch of commandos. And I say that because, again, I'm referencing your term for special, and once you say a special unit, you already put yourself as, whether you are or not, you place yourself as an elite. And so with that, you go out there with that mainframe that I'm already better than the people who I work with because I'm in this special unit. But then without the guidance, like you said, and my reference points being what they are, I'm not really, what I think I am.
You like the
is
gang.
Not really who I am.
Yeah, you like the gangs with no leadership. Yeah. That the issue with the gangs is that they have no leadership. They have no real loyalty. So back in the day, the gangs would say, we're gonna do what we're doing, how we do it. Somebody would be the boss to say that we do we ain't killing people in the street because that's bad for our business, bad for whatever. But the police the same way. All the OGs who could be there to enforce, they don't retire. They get their pension. They matter of fact, they coming to Florida. Ron DeSantis told them, come on down to Florida. We give you 10 more years in one of our sunny cities. So anyway, listen, this conversation, man, we could probably go on for a couple more hours, but our time is up. And we, I think that we really addressed the major part of what we wanted to really address and talk about tonight in reference to, are we a part of the solution? Are we a part of the problem? And we used the backdrop of, the officers and their behavior as our backdrop in this conversation in reference to fatherhood. So I think it's important, fathers, to think about, and this is something to really ask yourself before you go to bed tonight, in reference to your children, in reference to how you're living and what you're doing. Are you a solution? Or are you being a problem? And then let's figure out how that we'll finish this conversation tomorrow night on 24/7 Dad, and part 2 of Fatherhood Talks in closed settings. But I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. Thank all the fathers for the inputs and the time. And I think that, this is, as I said before, this incident is a big precedence for a lot of stuff. And we won't really recognize how much of a precedence it is until, we start seeing the outcomes of it and the results of it. We've seen the outcomes of George Floyd, but the outcomes of this is going to be way, way different. And I think that people, if you're not thinking about it, not really processing it, you really need to, if you wasn't talking to your kids, if you were just, you really need to start talking and really disciplining your kids. And when I mean discipline, let me be very clear, teaching and guiding. Now, I didn't say punish, disciplining your kids, because the discipline is, I would think that the discipline is better to have than emotional intelligence. But I think you can't have emotional intelligence if you don't have discipline. So just throw that in there, just put that in the mix. Again, thanks everybody. And fathers, if you repeat after me, I am.
I am.
I am.
Come on, guys.
I am.
I am.
I am.
I am.
I am a man of honor.
I am a man of honor.
I am.
I am.
I am.
I am.
I am a man of courage.
I am.
a man of courage.
I say I am.
I am.
I am.
I am.
I am a man of respect.
I
am a man of respect.
As I say that I am.
I am.
I am.
You are.
I say that we are.
We are championship fathers.
I'm coming for you, LJ. I'm coming for you.
Hey, it's you tonight, Lionel. It's you tonight. It's your night.
All right, so we'll see y'all here. If you want to join us tomorrow night, fathers, look in the box below for the Zoom link, and we'll be there. If not, we'll see you all next week on Fatherhood Talks, the Fatherhood Think Tank.
Good evening and good night.
Gentlemen.
All right, good night.
Great night, everybody.
All right. Good night.